We all like to compare the three most played and enjoyed of the Fallout series: Fallout 3, New Vegas, and 4. There are also some who love to compare the moderns versus the original. Just look at H. Bomber Guy's Why Fallout 3 is Garbage video, where in some of his arguments he compares the shortcomings of Fallout 3 to its predecessors. Seriously, watch this. I don't care if Fallout 3 is your personal favorite game in the series, you'll agree with most of the points he brings up. They're good ones. But so far as I've seen anyway, no one has really compared the two dinosaurs of the series. Today I'm going to compare Fallout and Fallout 2, while still in an educational and retrospective angle. So what I want to get over with first is what they both share, so that we're all on the same page on how these games really worked and why people loved them both in the first place. One, they both run on a semi-turn-based combat system. Semi-turn-based because it's only turn-based when you're in combat, that's when your action points apply. It's really strategic. 2, they are both excellent role-playing games. In Fallout 1 and 2, with its special system that allows specification on any character's strengths and weaknesses, you and the developers can design any character that you could think of, and play that character all the way through, both in gameplay and dialogue. Do you want to play a brute who can't speak all that well but has a knack for gambling and other luck-based actions? Alright, sure, let's take that idea and make it a reality, make it more deep. With this character, we will give him the jinx trait, meaning that critical failures happen to everyone more often, including you. This changes the entire loop of combat gameplay, with characters repeatedly dropping their guns, jamming their guns, or critically failing so hard that their legs become crippled beyond repair. Because he's so dumb and can't really express anything beyond grunts and burps, a lot of the quests you're going to have to take your own brain to solve because of your character's inept intelligence. And that's just one example of many. I've played Fallout 1 through at least 15 times by now because I'm always coming up and writing down new character ideas and concepts that the game always seems to complement. And not just character builds that you watch in the average Fudge Muppet video, where the goal is to create the most overpowered walking tank using the idea of a specific weapon or perk, like the Santa Claus build using the Junt Jet, but actual character ideas with strengths, weaknesses, and specialties. A sarcastic mercenary? Sure. A clumsy thief? Fine. A big, rude jerk who always says the wrong thing at the wrong time, always leading him into nearly impossible combat situations? 3. The games are aware of what they are. They act as simulated game masters. These games can easily be translated into a tabletop gaming session. Hell, my friends and I plan to literally go through the entirety of Fallout 1 using the game's rules and my game mastering skills because of what they are. The games take advantage of this. Think about it. Most of the actual games themselves are the rules and computations behind them, not the graphical part of them. In fact, the graphical part of it is the least important. It's the writing and the role-playing systems that make them shine. This is why if you really want a detailed view in a room or a dungeon, it's much less looking at the dungeon or room itself, but rather scrolling your mouse on the icons and sprites that represent them, and getting a detailed description through well-written words, just like what a real game master would do when a player would want a more descriptive explanation of the room he or she is in. 4. A recognizable but hard to replicate humor style. Both of these games are two of the funniest and most enjoyable computer role-playing games of the 90s, and I really do mean that. The humor mixes well with the hopeless world that it's set in. It takes that hopelessness and makes satire out of it. What else can you do? There's just nothing like encountering the bridge guard, who will literally make you recite a scene from the Holy Grail. It feels so out there and alien, but it also just fits. It's embedded deep and feels like just another element of this fictional world. 5. The story structure. One of the most amazing feelings I got was right after I finished Fallout 1 about 2 years ago. It was when I wasn't even playing, too. I had just finished after watching the last cutscene, just thinking. It amazed me how when I first started playing about 2 weeks prior, I had the simple objective of finding a water chip in a practically next-door vault. And then just 20 minutes prior, I was speaking with the literal incarnation of humanity's doom, one who would bring about a new age, a new evolution by force. Except I had physical proof just in my pocket that this master race was incapable of reproduction. I had to somehow find a way to convince this super-intelligent meatbag that his plan was set to fail. He couldn't listen to reason. Nothing I could do could convince him that humanity was worth saving, because there was no real argument to bring up, other than the mutants look weird and ugly and that I didn't want to die along with my vault. The only thing I could do was show him this holotape. And all of this, from the 2 weeks prior to the 20 minutes prior, felt completely seamless, as so in Fallout 2. The simple objective of hunting for your village's salvation seamlessly morphs into a complicated plan to dismantle the last breathing body of the American government. This is possibly the one thing that really stuck with the Bethesda sequels, because this element reached and was recognized by everyone that played it. 6. The games have an extraordinary amount of reactivity. If you don't know what I'm talking about, compare the way, say, Dragon Age Inquisition or Mass Effect 2 or 3 induce replayability on you, with binary options and weird choice and consequence situations, versus one of my favorite situations in the original Fallout, in which when you ask the water merchants to deliver water to Vault 13 to extend your timer, if you do this, the game's bad guy force, the mutant army, will find your vault sooner than they would have otherwise. Stuff like that is everywhere in the original Fallout, and more so in Fallout 2, and it really makes those games feel like real, reactive worlds. So now that you know that, I'm going to go over the games separately, and then at the end I'm finally going to compare them. Let's start with the granddaddy of them all, Fallout, a post-nuclear role-playing game. The original Fallout was released on September 30th of 1997. It was originally planned to be a direct successor to the 1988 Interplay game Wasteland. Wasteland included many elements that, in my eyes, are very ahead of its time. Moral dilemmas that had no right answer, ambiguity, and characters that had both strengths and weaknesses. The idea for a Wasteland sequel came about when Tim Kaine, a programmer at Interplay, wanted to create his own game engine. After about a year of engine development, Tim Kaine and the rest of his assigned team had to come up with a setting. The first idea was time travel, another was with aliens, and the final was post-apocalyptic. However, Interplay couldn't gain the rights to Wasteland because EA was already developing their sequel titled Fountain of Dreams. Interplay had gained the GURPS license, so why not use it for this new game, and from then on, Vault 13, a post-nuclear adventure, was born, which would later get the more clever title of Fallout. A vision statement was put together by the team to communicate to marketing and PR what Fallout was, and some of the stuff that I previously listed is on there. You can find the vision statement somewhere on the internet. I'll post a link if I can remember, for history's sake. When Fallout came out, it was an instant classic for many reasons. Fallout actually came out during a drought of computer role-playing games, and it actually ended up refilling the gas tank and revving up the engine for a few times, for more to come. The game was praised for its character system, its story and writing style, intense violence, and player reactivity, which we discussed earlier. Fallout starts with you creating your character by choosing your 7 attributes: agility, charisma, endurance, luck, intelligence, perception, and strength. Fun fact, in that order that I just listed, Tim Kaine wanted to name the system Ace-Lips. Also, according to Tim Kaine, this name lasted for about 24 hours before its more clever counterpart was discovered. Your attributes would affect 2 things. It would affect derived statistics, which were permanent, and starting values for skills based on a preset mathematical expression. You would tag 3 of these skills, giving them a quick percentage boost, and also making it so that they level twice as fast during play. Last are the optional traits that you can pick, further enhancing the feeling of a character's strengths and weaknesses, with Jinxed and Bloody Mess being my all-time favorite. The only problem that I can see with this system is the certain balancing problems that it has, and the fact that a lot of skills are useless during play, that wouldn't become more useful until Fallout 2. For example, gambling and outdoorsmen are 2 of the most obvious dump stats I've ever probably seen in any RPG. After character creation, the Overseer states that the water chip has failed, and we all know the rest. We go to Shady Sands, help out the villagers a bit, get a rope, and go to Vault 15. Unfortunately, the water chip can't be found there, so we use our newfound coordinates from speaking to people from Shady Sands to get to Junktown. You walk in, and immediately the guard starts telling you about the town sheriff and shopkeeper Killian, and a casino owner named Gizmo. It's implied that we need supplies. Our journey here has been a long one, so we go to Killian's shop, and he immediately showers us with a friendly greeting and warm hospitality as we buy some ammo off of him. The next thing we know, a hired gunman who declares his allegiance to Gizmo attempts to assassinate Killian. It's now up to you to help Killian by trying to get evidence against Gizmo. He gives you a bug and a wiretap to attempt to record his confession. So you do, and you bring Gizmo to justice, or perhaps join with Gizmo and take out Killian. In about 30 minutes, we've gone from buying ammo off of a dude to trying to gather evidence against a crime lord, and all without a quest marker or objective point telling us to. It's all completely seamless, a situation applicable to the larger scale that is the rest of the game's main storyline. After the situation in Junktown, you travel further south to the hub, where you find out the location of another water chip in the ghoul city of Necropolis. After potentially fixing Necropolis's water pumps, you take their water chip for yourself and return to Vault 13. The Overseer reads your report and is frankly frightened of a potential growing mutant army based off of the few you saw at Necropolis. He sends you back out with two objectives. 1. Destroy the source of the mutants, and 2. Destroy the leader of the mutants. With very few leads, you head out again. You've heard from word of mouth that there is an organization to the southeast, known as the Brotherhood of Steel, and that they house technologies and knowledge that can help you on your journeys. Unfortunately, they don't let you in and send you on a pilgrimage to the Clo, the ruins of West Tech Research, where you learn a lot about these mutations. You learn about the pre-war pan-immunity virus, whose goal is to bind DNA and regenerate certain cells to combat an airborne virus launched by the Chinese known as the Plague, and how it soon morphed into the Forced Evolutionary Virus, or FEV, whose goal is to create super soldiers. You couldn't read up on all of it, though, since the project was moved to the Mariposa military base before human subjects were tested upon. After doing the Brotherhood's work for him, they let you in. You experience a bright cast of characters, from Paladin Rhombus, who is as militaristic as he is wise, to Vree, who probably has the greatest opening line of all time for a character like her.
It's a fine day for learning. Can I help you?
You can ask Vree about these mutations, and she'll actually give you a disc that proves these mutants are sterile, which will come in handy later. In continuing to aid the Brotherhood, you'll soon discover a ghoul by the name of Harold in the hub. Harold will give some backstory on the old world days, how he never forgot those sirens. He also gives a backstory on a certain character, a scientist by the name of Richard Gray. Before he ended up here, him and Richard, along with a few other travelers, were on a journey to find the source of the mutants. Unfortunately, a crane activates behind them while inside a military base, knocking Richard into some sort of green acid and knocking Harold out. This story alludes to so many points in the game's plot, and it comes so early. After rescuing a Brotherhood soldier from the hub in return, you'll finally get your first suit of power armor. And you talk to the High Elder himself, General Maxon, grandson of Captain Maxon, who founded the Brotherhood right after the start of the Great War. In discussing the mutant threat, Maxon sends you on a scout mission to Mariposa, in which you find that the mutants are crawling all over the place. You return and discuss with the Elder Council the plan for attacking the base, since, with the mutants' growing numbers, defense isn't an option for the Brotherhood. You destroy the base after a long enough encounter, and you gain some information about the leader of the super mutants, and, more importantly, the fate of Richard Gray, and how through him being dunked into the vats of which is used to create these mutants who've been fighting all this time, he was morphed into the Master, founder of the Unity, which coincides with the children of the Cathedral to execute his orders. You go here to discuss some things. This is honestly the first science fiction game I've ever played in which you have the option of having an intelligent, moral conversation with the game's main boss, of which you don't even think of as a main boss. When you meet the Master himself, you don't think, yes, the boss of all mutants. You ask yourself, is this really what happened to Richard Gray?
The Unity will bring about the Master race.
Master!
One able to survive, or even
Thrive!
in the wasteland. As long as there are differences, we will
Tear ourselves apart!
fighting each other. We need one race,
Race!
one goal,
Goal!
one people to move forward to our destiny.
You show the Master that his plan is doomed to fail because of the sterile element of the mutants, and you escape, only to be exiled from your vault for fear of the vault's people wanting to emulate you and your successes in the wasteland. This is truly the best ending to any science fiction work that I've ever experienced.
It cannot be. This would mean that
All my work!
has been for nothing. Everything that I've tried to...
A failure!
It can't be. I don't think that I can
Continue?
to have done the things I have done in the name of progress and healing. It was madness. I can see that now. Madness. There is no hope. Leave now. Leave while you still have.
Hope.
So, now on to Fallout 2. Fallout 2 officially came out 1 year after the original in 1998. By this time, however, the game would not be developed by Tim Kaine or any of the main original designers, but rather under a subsidiary of Interplay known as Black Isle. Key designers and writers were Chris Avellone and Josh Sawyer, who continue to build upon and influence the series today. Fallout 2 would strive to be bigger, better, and harder, as well as offering an extension to the original story. Fallout 2's method of development was a bit different since, well, number 1, it was developed in under 18 months, and 2, areas would be designed under certain designers and writers, leading the game to be more fragmented and separated than Fallout 1, but in my opinion, this worked well as the game had a lot more interesting stories to tell because of it, at the expense of overlapping storylines between areas. The game also suffered, or in my opinion, was blessed, because it did not have a creative lead. While this did hurt the game in terms of its near unrecognizable references to pop culture from that time period, it also helped in all of the other writing and humor that exists within the game. I'll never forget the Hubologists, with Juan Cruz and Vicky Goldman being the sponsors, casually poking fun at real-world Scientology, based on the science fiction works of L. Ron Hubbard, with John Cruz being a loyal follower. I'll never forget the Enclave Drill Sergeant Dornan, who continuously screams commands at me until I get my power armor on.
Navarro, so you're the new replacement. You are out of uniform, soldier. Where is your power armor? Don't have any? You expect me to believe that, maggot? The truth is, you lost an expensive piece of Army-issue equipment. That suit is going to come out of your pay, and you will remain in this man's army until you are 510 years old, which is the number of years it will take for you to pay for a Mark II powered combat armor you have lost. Report to the armory and have a new suit issued to you. Then report back to me, Private. Dismissed.
I'll never forget that secret conversation you could have with an Enclave soldier that gave you a moment to get a humanizing feeling of the Enclave, and then directly allowed you to mock it. All in all, I believe Black Isle achieved what they set out to do, to make a worthy successor to an already cult classic. Fallout 2 begins with you having a discussion with the village elder. The village of Arroyo, settled by your grandfather, otherwise known as the Vault Dweller, otherwise known as the protagonist of the original Fallout, is in famine. The crops are dying, the animals are dying, and the water wells run dry. It is up to you to retrieve the Garden of Eden Creation Kit, or GECK, to save your village and make it prosperous again. Your first stop is Klamath, a small town to the east. Here you will find all that you need to remind you that you're playing Fallout. Whores, drunks, drug dealers, and a mentally handicapped muscle man who asks you to look over his Brahmin and kill some rad scorpions. Your goal right now is to find Vic, a trader who sells old Vault memorabilia, like the Vault 13 flask you're carrying now. You find out that his location is in the Den, another crime-ridden town. There, you free Vic from gang captivity by one of the many ways. You then travel to Vault City, where you, at first, assume is Vault 13, and it isn't. You do, however, find out more about the NCR. You find out that this new California Republic was built out of Shady Sands, the first village you encounter in Fallout 1. From Tandy, the NCR's president, now over 100 years old, you get a quest to go to Vault 15, in which you finally get a record of vaults in the region, including Vault 13. In Vault 13, you find a community of, well, talking Deathclaws. Yes, I'm not joking, talking Deathclaws. The only disappointment here is the lack of at least one talking head for one of them. There, they will gladly give up Vault 13's GECK. However, when you return to Arroyo, nothing is like it seems. Your village is nearly empty except for one person, who tells you that it was the Enclave. After another long goose chase, you track the Enclave back to their base, and find that they're the remnants of the American government. You kill Frank Horrigan, the mutant-like lieutenant of the Enclave, and free both stolen Vault 13 inhabitants and your Arroyo friends. The game ends with Arroyo using the GECK to make a thriving community, with both the Vault Dwellers and the Arroyo villagers living in peace, united, just as the original Vault Dweller himself would have hoped. So, now on to my personal comparison between the two. While Fallout 2 is a pretty long-winded goose chase, it was a fun one nonetheless, bringing you across different and fun parts of the newly developed wasteland, like New Reno, in which you can quite literally become a porn star, or the Sierra Army Depot, in which you can, if you want to, stuff one of your companion's brains into a robot. Fallout 2 is of the more lighthearted by far. Fallout 2 is also more political as well. Most of the role-playing done in the game is listening to different opinions on how they think the world should be run. From the controlling, all-knowing government style of Vault City to the democracy-like New California Republic. Everyone has an opinion. By contrast, Fallout 1 takes itself more seriously. It was the first in a planned series, how could it not? If it joked around too much, it ran the risk of losing its charm because of its overabundance. Fallout 1 wants you to feel the dread of a newly developing society shortly after a thermonuclear war, in a world where many technologies of our age never came to exist while others did. Fallout 2, on the other hand, wants you to feel the political problems of a new frontier developing on the fragments on an old society, and because of this, it doesn't need to take itself too seriously. It can sling around as many jokes as it wants to, and I'm personally glad it did. Fallout 1, while still being a difficult game with many fail states, was still a pretty relaxing game to go through. Tag at least one combat skill, save often, don't forget to bring Grad-X through the glow, and you're pretty much set. You'll make mistakes that can bring you to a sudden halt, requiring you to go back a few hours to pick up a certain autopsy report that you dropped, but ultimately, Fallout 1 is pretty forgiving when compared to its successor. Fallout 2 is rigorous, and it's long. You can play for a long time, but small decisions that you made 10 hours back can still creep up on you because of its size and amount of reactivity. There is no shortage in the difficulty department of Fallout 2. In terms of the writing itself, I also think Fallout 2 takes the cake. There are so many characters in this game that catch my brain's attention, like Myron, for example, the horny teenage jet creator who is so full of himself. The Talking Deathclaws, the loser in Vault 13 who just can't get his life together and is depressed because of it. Even minor characters like the Enclave guy who talks to you after interacting with a computer screen in Gecko. The President of the United States, Richardson, has a very human-related reason as to why he believes that all mutations are to be purged. While Fallout 1 had this, it had this in smaller bursts. I feel that Fallout 2 is the prime example for how Fallout games are to be written, which is also why I love New Vegas so much. And finally, we have to talk about the main villain. In Fallout 2, you could say it was Frank Horrigan, but I believe the real main antagonist is President Richardson. While I did state that he has more of a human reason for what he's doing, I feel he isn't given much of any suspense or wowing moment like I did when I found out that the Master from Fallout 1 was Richard Gray, a character that was referenced twice. Once from Harold, and second from his journal he kept in Mariposa Military Base, as he went through the transformation from a man to a telepathic, near-omniscient god. I feel that the Master had a lot more depth behind him than when we saw on our computer screens, and for that reason, the Master holds a special place in my heart. Horrigan doesn't really compare either in my opinion, even when I do put him under the equation. And finally, you have the big elephant in the room, the size of the two games. Fallout 1 takes me approximately 2 days to complete, while using as little metagame knowledge as possible. Fallout 2, on the other hand, on a thorough playthrough, lasted me about 2.5 weeks of exploring, questing, and goose hunting. And before you bring up the quantity over quality argument, the main reason that I have to give my heart to Fallout 2 is because it's bigger, and by bigger I mean fucking huge, and it still retains every inch of detail, depth, excellent writing, and enthralling science fiction that kept me going through it, despite its size. And with that, I would like to close off this video by saying, well, if you haven't played either of these two games already, either because you hate isometrics or you just feel that they are too hard, just do it for me, okay? You'll remember them forever, and you'll find a new love for this franchise that you wouldn't have ever gotten from just looking at a wiki page. You'll feel the blood, sweat, and pure genius that the developers put into these two gems, and that will burn into your memory as two of the best computer role-playing games you have ever bothered to play. Thanks for watching.